Were the earliest Christians, and by that I mean the apostles and their earliest successors and followers, persecuted? Let's get into it. I'm going to make 4 independent arguments split up into 3 separate videos defending this syllogism. Premise 1. If the earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith, it is highly probable that they sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Premise 2. The earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith. Conclusion. It is highly probable that the earliest Christians sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Keep in mind this is a valid argument, which means if the premises are true, then the conclusion necessarily follows, which would mean it is highly probable that the earliest Christians did in fact believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ as a historical event. In this video, we're going to be defending premise 1. And then in the next 2 videos, we're going to be defending premise 2, and I have 4 independent arguments in total. So just a reminder, premise 1 is, if the earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith, it is highly probable that they sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. This is what we're going to be defending in this video. The first thing we have to know is that people do not die for holding to a claim that they know to be false. Notice how this is different than saying people will not die for a lie. A common response to this argument goes something like this. You, as a Christian, would say that every martyr from a different religion has died for a lie or for a false belief. So what makes early Christian persecution any different than those martyrs from other religions? But notice how I didn't say that people won't die for something that is false. I said that people do not die for holding to a claim that they know to be false. People will only die for holding beliefs that they sincerely believe. No lie is worth dying for unless the consequences for telling the truth would somehow be worse for the person than continuing to profess the lie. Notice how for early Christians, this wouldn't apply. If they stopped professing to be Christians, they would stop being persecuted. The strength of this premise relies on the context. These Christians were being persecuted and even killed for holding to claims that they could simply reject instead and stop being persecuted or martyred. This makes it highly unlikely that they were lying. Now, some of you might be asking, how do we know the earliest Christians could simply stop professing to be Christians and then they would stop being persecuted? Great question. Let's read a written exchange between Pliny the Younger and Trajan, writing towards the end of the 1st century AD. Meanwhile, in the case of those who were denounced to me as Christians, I have observed the following procedure. I interrogated these as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and a third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I ordered executed, for I had no doubt that, whatever the nature of their creed, stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy surely deserved to be punished. Notice how they were interrogated 2 or even 3 times before finally being executed. Focus most of all at the end of the quote where he said it was their stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy that was deserving of punishment. Trajan, in response to this letter from Pliny the Younger, says, if they, Christians, are denounced and proved guilty, they are to be punished, with this reservation, that whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves it, that is, by worshiping our gods, even though he was under suspicion in the past, shall obtain pardon through repentance. Notice if they change their ways, they would receive a pardon. It's also important to notice that Trajan says that they could prove they were not Christians by worshiping other gods. This also goes a long way in proving that early Christianity was a monotheistic religion despite seeing Jesus as God. So far, through extra-biblical testimony, we have established that the earliest Christians were in fact persecuted, and all they had to do to stop being persecuted was recant their beliefs, and they would receive a pardon. This next quote I want to share with you will unveil the severity of the persecution they were facing. Tacitus says, Nero falsely accused and executed with the most exquisite punishments those people called Christians, who were infamous for their abominations. Therefore, first those who were seized who admitted their faith, and then, using the information they provided, a vast multitude were convicted, not so much for the crime of burning the city, but for hatred of the human race, and perishing, they were additionally made into sports. they were killed by dogs by having the hides of beasts attached to them, or they were nailed to crosses or set aflame. And when the daylight passed away, they were used as nighttime lamps. This goes to show that the nature of the persecution that early Christians were facing was not simply a slap on the wrist. They were being crucified, set on fire, mauled by dogs, and used as nighttime lamps. Do you really believe that anyone would go through punishment like that if they knew they were telling a lie? I highly doubt that. But let's get back to our syllogism. Premise 1, which is what we've defended in this video, says, if the earliest Christians faced persecution without departing from their profession of faith, it is highly probable that they sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. And we've seen, based on the nature of the persecution they were facing, as well as how easy it was to obtain a pardon, how unlikely it would be for them to continue to profess faith in Jesus Christ and his death and resurrection unless they sincerely believed it. We've shown premise 1 to be true through extra-biblical testimony. In the next two videos, we will bring the internal evidence of the biblical corpus itself to defend premise 2. We will seek to show that the apostles themselves and those directly connected to them were in fact persecuted without departing from their profession of faith. Remember that this is a valid argument. So if both premise 1 and premise 2 are true, the conclusion necessarily follows, meaning that it is highly probable that the earliest Christians sincerely believed in the death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth as a historical event. Thank you so much for watching this video regarding early Christian persecution. I hope you liked it. Be sure to tune in to the next two videos defending premise 2 of our argument. Give it a thumbs up if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.